I think one way to look and see what you're doing on this planet is to look at what breaks your heart, what really breaks your heart. Maybe a lot of things break your heart, but what really breaks your heart, and what makes your heart sing. It's often the case that what breaks your heart and what makes your heart sing are related. And if you put those two together, sometimes you can find exactly why you're here. Mark Twain said, "The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why."
Hi, my name is Zenka Caro. I'm founder of LightNet, and my passion and purpose is to make the impossible possible. I am here today with one of my all-time favorite people on the planet alive today, and her name is Lynne Twist. Just hearing her speak is so powerful. She's so eloquent. She's so humble. She's written books such as The Soul of Money. She's also raised $200 million for the Hunger Project to stop hunger around the world. She's co-founder of the Pachamama Alliance, which is restoring the lungs of the planet in the Amazon. And she really is this evolutionary leader that's asking us to think about how much is enough, what is our relationship to money, and how are we evolving the planet today. This is an incredible interview, and I'm so grateful that we get to share it with you today.
I have many ways of talking about that, but I think the seminal experience I had was with Buckminster Fuller, when he shared his purpose as a little individual who could make a difference that would impact all of humanity. That was his experiment with his life, and his statement was to live in a way that you could create a world that works for everyone, with no one and nothing left out. And that idea, to participate, to contribute, to create a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, not only, kind of got seared into my heart, but it became a phrase that then got used through the EST network with Werner Erhard, which I was very involved in the early days of EST, and then later what's called Landmark, but it became sort of the foundation for the Hunger Project. And I was very involved in the Hunger Project for many, many years. I was part of a whole beautiful moment when Buckminster Fuller met Werner Erhard, the founder of EST, and they connected, and out of that relationship, the commitment to end world hunger was born. So I was a kind of a midwife or background player. And when Werner, who had also become engaged with that purpose, a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, to create that, he and Bucky looked at what was the most foundational breakdown in the human family, the most primary fundamental breakdown in the human family that kept that vision from being real. It was that 1 billion people at the time could not feed themselves or their families. And so that was when the Hunger Project was born. There were 4.3 billion people on Earth at that time. 44,000 people a day were dying of hunger and starvation, most of them children under 5, in a world awash with food. So that was an indictment of the human family that became so clear for them in the context of a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, to not be able to feed yourself or your children. Such a breakdown in integrity, that was where the first, I would say, expression of that purpose became real for me. And I became very, very involved in the Hunger Project, the commitment to end world hunger. The Hunger Project was really my teacher, because in the context of Bucky's work, Buckminster Fuller, today almost everything he predicted is happening. He was at that time called the grandfather of the future. He had invented the geodesic dome, for which he was famous, but he also had invented an electric car in 1949. He saw the end of the fossil fuel era in 1949 and invented an electric car. People called him crazy. It didn't seem logical to have an electric car. We had all this oil. But that was the kind of thinker he was. He was way ahead of his time. And in a talk that Bucky gave in Marin County in 1976, Bucky shared that the world in 1976 had passed a critical threshold, and he put his arm out like this. I'll never forget this. I hadn't met Bucky then, but I knew that I wanted to know him, and I had a huge affinity for him, and I was in the audience at this talk. And he stood on the stage, this little, short, bald man with glasses, and was in his 80s at the time, and he looked out at the audience and he said, humanity, 1976, has just passed a critical threshold, and that threshold is this. And he said, and we'll never go back. And it's monumental, and it changes everything. And I didn't understand most of what Bucky said, I can confess, but when he set up this thing he was about to say, I remember sitting up in my chair, and if I get one thing, it's going to be this. And he said, that threshold, we've crossed it, and recently. And when Buckminster Fuller said recently, he meant in the last, 50 years or 100 years. That's the way he thought, in huge swaths of time. And he said, humanity is now doing so much more with so much less that it's absolutely clear that we have enough for everyone, everywhere, to have a healthy and productive life. And when Bucky said we have enough for everyone, everywhere, to have a healthy and productive life, I started to cry, just thinking about it. And he said that reality maybe has always been true, but it's absolutely clear now. Humanity's genius, humanity's innovation, humanity's way of inventiveness, our science, our technology will continue to do more and more with less and less. So the fact that there's enough for everyone everywhere to have a healthy and productive life will continue to be true forever. And he said that means we move from this side of the line, which is a paradigm of scarcity. There's not enough to go around and someone's always going to be left out. A you or me world. To this side of the line, a paradigm of sufficiency. A you and me world. On this side of the line, either you make it at my expense or I make it at your expense, because there's not enough for both of us. That's a you or me paradigm. But on this side of the line, it's a you and me paradigm. You and I can both make it at no one's expense. And he said, we've crossed that line, and it changes everything. And I remember I'm just like tears streaming down my face. I had a kundalini thing go up my spine. I knew I had heard something that was life-changing, but I didn't understand it then. And then he said something really important. He said, it'll take about 50 years for us to realize this new paradigm, because all the institutions of humanity are rooted in a you or me understanding of the world. Clearly the economy is rooted in a paradigm of scarcity, a you or me understanding of the world. But it's not just the economy, he said. It's also education is rooted in a you or me understanding of the world. Governance is rooted in a you or me understanding of the world. Healthcare is rooted in a you. He went on, and then he said even religion is rooted in a you or me understanding of the world. He said those are the institutions inside of which we live. It will take probably something like 50 years for them to become so dysfunctional, all of our institutions, to become so dysfunctional that they will begin collapsing under their own weight. and we won't be able to repair them. We won't be able to prop them up anymore. We will need to let them collapse, let them die, and we will begin to recreate all the institutions of humankind from a new paradigm, a you and me paradigm, a paradigm of profound sufficiency. So he said this in 1976. It is now, at this time when we're having this conversation, 2025. So it's about 50 years later, and sure enough, everything is collapsing, not just some stuff, everything. And it's collapsing because it's inaccurately sourced, and it's now, we can't fix it. So that experience of understanding the profound nature of sufficiency, not abundance, sufficiency. And Bucky also said it's not an amount. It's an understanding, a way of being in the world. It's a state of being, sufficiency, enough. So I don't know how to explain this, but I got it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't have explained it to anybody. I'm explaining it to you now, 50 years later, but I couldn't explain it, but I got it. I became it. And that's when the Hunger Project began. And that's when I went to Ethiopia, Ghana, Senegal, Mozambique, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Guinea-Bissau, Gabon, Burkina Faso. And I saw hunger and starvation and malnutrition and war and oppression and horrendous things. And you would think that I would say scarcity, but no. I saw sufficiency in every person. I saw the wholeness and completeness of the human beings. I began to see that there's no poor people on this planet. That the label poor, when you label someone poor, you demean them and you demean yourself. Because the people I met and worked with through my whole life who live in circumstances that we would call circumstances of poverty, they are not poor. They're courageous. They're inventive. They have profound relationships. They have a strong inner life. They exhibit more courage to live through a day than you and I are going to need in our whole lifetime. There's nothing poor about them. What's poor is their circumstances, not them. And those circumstances actually foster a kind of courage and strength and character that we do read books and go to workshops for. So I started to see I would never call people poor again in my life. I also became the chief fundraiser for the Hunger Project, and I realized that to call people rich is a disservice as well. People are whole and complete people living in the sometimes tyranny of the ebb and flow of excess resources. It's not always that great. So from the moment I committed to ending world hunger, the world presented itself to me in ways that I saw the profound sufficiency of life, the enoughness of every single human being, the profound sufficiency of our planet, and the lie, I'll call it, of scarcity. That it's a lie. It's just not true. And if I unpack the lie of scarcity, if you just think that you believe, if you think you believe something, you don't really know if you believe it, if it's an already always mindset. An unconscious, unexamined mindset is something you don't even know you have. It's like the lens you're looking at. So people look at life as if there's not enough to go around and someone somewhere is always going to be left out. That mindset creates an us and a them. If you unconsciously think that, then the goal is to accumulate as much as you possibly can for you and yours, whoever you consider that to be, even at the expense of the people who get left out. But your job is to make sure you and yours are not left out. If you believe that there's not enough for everyone and someone's going to be left out, then it's rational, noble, responsible, the right thing to do, to accumulate as much as you possibly can to make sure you and yours are not among those who get left out, who you will help someday, but only when you're sure you have way more than you need. If you think about that, that's the paradigm in which we're living. That's what has the aberration of an Elon Musk being so ridiculously wealthy that he can't even stay centered in his own being. And then billions of people not being able to actually practically survive. So this paradigm of scarcity is horrendous. It's inaccurate. It has no integrity. It's killing us. So I can't remember your question, but I had a huge impact about the way I saw the world after that talk with Bucky Fuller. And then the Hunger Project really taught me that there are sufficient resources for all of us everywhere to have a healthy and productive life. And that will always be true. But our behavior is inconsistent with that. Our behavior is managed or manipulated by this unconscious, unexamined belief that there's not enough for everyone and someone's always got to be left out. And that's the source of more of better, more of anything is better, more cars, more money, more houses, more planes, more everything that's killing us. And we actually think that's the way that it is. So once I had that purpose, the whole world started to look completely different for me. And I also discovered that I am enough, that I have enough, that we are enough, and then there is enough. And that was not only game-changing, but life-changing for me. Well, I'd say my guiding purpose is this beautiful statement, creating a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out. And working on hunger and poverty, really, I mean, it's so humbling. Because the people living in conditions of hunger and poverty are some of the greatest people on earth, really. Yeah. So, I've had the great privilege of working with Mother Teresa and being by her side several years before she died. And, as extraordinary as she was and still is in the beauty of her spirit, which stays with all of us forever. The people that we served, the women, particularly women, I'll say, in the 1984-1985 famine, I sat with women who lost every single one of their children to starvation, and they were still alive. Almost incomprehensible to imagine that. One woman had lost 11 children to starvation, another 7, another 5, another 6. And we sat around a dry well in Ethiopia after that famine, and I was privileged to be with them when they did what's called the wailing ceremony. And we sat around a dry well, and each woman shared the excruciating story of the death of each child. Little Malaika was walking towards Mirage, and she was 3 years old, and before she got to what she thought was a pool of water, she collapsed. When her mother went to get her, she was dead. Or Mohammed suckling at a mother's breast, 3-4 months old, but the mom hadn't had water in 7 days, and so no milk, and he died on her breast. And after the name of each child and the story of each child's death, we would keen and wail and cry and scream for each child. Then we'd wash our hands and feet, wash our face, sit down again and talk about the next child. We did this for 5 days and 5 nights for all the children that they had lost. They lost all their children. They were all childless mothers by then. And I tell you that story because once that grieving, which was, you can hardly, you could hardly wipe yourself off the floor after it was over. We were so exhausted from the emotion. Each woman committed to use the rest of her life to make sure that no mother ever went through that again. And these were women who didn't know how to read or write. They'd never been to school. They were living in the Rift Valley of Ethiopia. And through a whole series of events, which I won't share, I paired them with 7 women in Ethiopia, 7 women in New York in an investment club, and they became sisters. And the women in Ethiopia, of the 7, I've kept track of 4 of them, and They went all the way through school, all the way from kindergarten all the way through. Two of them PhDs, one a scientist running an environmental lab in Ethiopia and Addis Ababa, another the head of the Environmental Protection Agency of Ethiopia, another a lawyer running a legal firm to protect women and women's rights, and another is a minister in the government. These are women who didn't know how to read and write when their children died. And they're just awesome. And they were awesome. They were always awesome. So it's like every human being is awesome. And when given the opportunity, we all will express our greatness. That's really my purpose. So the Hunger Project taught me so much. And then I had a big turn of events that shifted my focus, shifted my direction, but it comes from the same deep place, and that is I now work with the indigenous people of the Amazon, which I didn't expect to be doing. I thought I'd work on ending world hunger for the rest of my life, but I had a really remarkable turn of events. I had a big donor, a large donor. He was not a big man, he was a little man, but he had a lot of money. And he gave a lot of it to the Hunger Project. And he had a project in Guatemala, and he wanted me to coach his development director there. So he invited me to Guatemala. And I went with my friend John Perkins, who had been working in the Ecuadorian Amazon for 30 years. And John was on his board. And we went to Guatemala, and I took a 2-month leave from my work in Africa and Asia on hunger. That's where I was mostly working, sub-Saharan Africa, India, Bangladesh, countries like that. I hadn't done anything in South America. There was no hunger in South America. There isn't now. There's poverty, but not hunger. It's very distinct. Plenty of food in Latin America. So anyway, I'm in Guatemala, and my friend John, who'd been working with the indigenous people, the Shuar people in the Amazon for many years, said there's a shaman directing this whole project that we're visiting here. And my friend Bob had no idea that there was a shaman involved, but John, who'd been trained as a shaman himself, he could feel it. And so he and I went to see this shaman. We found out who it was, Roberto Pose, a Mayan shaman. And the shaman was a very, very powerful man, and I had never really thought about shamanism. This was 1994. I'd never seen a shaman. I kind of didn't even know anything about shamanism. I was working in Africa, but we go to see this guy, this amazing guy, and he agrees to do a shamanic ceremony with our group. So we met him at midnight on the top of a mesa in the mountains of Chichicastenango, Totonicapan, if you know Guatemala. And there was nothing around. It was a starry, starry, starry night. No moon. Just, you could probably read by the stars. No lights anywhere around. And we arrive at this designated place. There's 12 of us. And he's built a fire, not a bonfire, but a very robust fire, campfire. And he tells us through translation. He didn't speak Spanish or English, but my friend John spoke a little Mayan, so we could understand what he was asking us. He asked us to lay around the fire on the ground with our feet towards the fire like a giant wagon wheel. So we did that. And then he starts drumming, and chanting. And his voice is incredible. And he starts whistling and singing, and the drumming, and the crackling fire, and the stars, and the voice. And he tells us to close our eyes and journey. And I close my eyes, and I think, well, I'll just take a nice little nap. It was midnight. But no, the sound of his voice, and the drum, and the crackling fire was so awesome, and so otherworldly, and so mystical, and so juicy, and super cool, and amazing. And I'm thinking, oh, this is so cool. And then I felt my right arm starting to quiver, and I had to extend it. I couldn't leave it next to my body. And then my left arm started to quiver, and I had to extend that arm. And then I felt this weird, hard thing grow on my face, and then I felt like I absolutely had to lift my body with these things that were now kind of like wings up off the ground, and I had to fly into the night sky. I just had to do it. There was no question about it. I couldn't stop myself. And I looked down, and I saw the fire and the wagon wheel of people, and I saw myself down there, but yet I was up here, and I could hear the shaman's voice and the drum, yet I was compelled, like drawn, to fly into the night sky in like slow motion like this, into the stars. And it was just glorious and gorgeous and exquisite. And then it started to dawn, and I looked down and I realized I was flying over a vast, 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 unending forest of green. And it was so beautiful. There was nothing but green. It went forever and ever and ever and ever. And I'm flying like this in slow motion over this amazing forest. And I could see all the way through the canopy down to the little critters on the ground. But when I'd lift up my head and I guess my beak, I could see forever to the whole horizon. And it was just mesmerizing and hypnotic. And then these disembodied faces of men with orange geometric face paint on their faces and yellow, red, and black feather crowns on their heads started to float up from the forest floor through the canopy and speak to the bird and call to the bird in a kind of strange tongue. And then they would disappear back into the forest, and I would just keep flying. And it was just an amazing encounter. And then they would show up again and call in a strange language to me, the bird. And it was a beautiful encounter, like a holy encounter, a sacred encounter. And then they would go back into the forest, and then I would just keep flying. And this kept happening over and over and over again. And it was beautiful and mesmerizing and heartful and, just hypnotic almost. And then there was this bang, 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 loud drum beat. And I remember realizing that's the shaman calling us back. So I rubbed my eyes and I sat up, and the fire had gone down to embers, and all the people in the circle were like, "Ooh, that was really something." And you could tell something happened for everybody. So the shaman asked each person to share their vision, and rough translation, but we did the best we could. And the first person became a hummingbird, the second one a snake, the next one a deer, the next person a butterfly, the next person a wolf. And it got to me, and I shared my story of becoming this giant bird. And I remember I was right across from the shaman, like I am looking at you. And he was a really weird looking guy. Anyway, he's kind of scary looking guy. And in the embers of the fire, you know how people look kind of weird. And it was scary. And after I shared my story, he looked at me kind of weird, I think. I don't really know, but I couldn't really see him, but I felt weird. And then the next person, the next person, the next person, the next person. And then John, my friend John Perkins, who'd worked with the Schwar for 30 years, he shared his vision. It was the same as mine. So that was a showstopper. Then the shaman completed the ritual for everyone, dismissed everyone but John and I, and sat us down and told us that we didn't have a normal vision, that people were dreaming us to them, that we were being called, and then we needed to go to them. And that was like a little weird for me, but I was open to weird, but I had work to do. I was ending world hunger, so this was inconvenient. And the shaman said, you need to go to them. And John said, Lynn, I know who they are. I know where they are. They're the Achuar people of Ecuador. They're calling for first contact. The Shuar people told me the Achuar are ready for contact, and they dream people to them. That's what this is. We have to go. I said, John, I'm ending world hunger. I can't do that. We had a few more hungry people, I'm not done. So I said, you do that. I've got to go to Africa. And he said, and the shaman said this too, they won't leave you alone till you come. And I didn't really believe that. It was too, I just wasn't, I couldn't handle it actually. So I went to Africa. I had a big meeting in Ghana in the Accra Hotel in the conference room for the Hunger Project Board of Directors of Ghana. And I was in the Novotel, which is a beautiful French hotel, and we're in the conference room. And I'm with 5 men and 3 women, Ghanaian women and men. Ghanaian people have very, very dark blue-black skin. They're very beautiful people. And I was sitting in on their board meeting from the global headquarters. And the board meeting was just going great and really interesting, and I wasn't leading it. I was sitting in on it. And then at a certain point, the men, and only the men, started having orange geometric face paint appear on their black faces like this. And no one said anything. And I thought I was going crazy. So I do what women do. We go to the ladies' room. That's our thing. So I washed my face with water, cold water. I looked at the mirror. It was, what's wrong with me? Come out of it. That weird thing that happened in Guatemala. You need to snap with it. So I went back and into the room. Everybody was normal. And then within, I'd say, 10 minutes, it happened again. Orange geometric face paint showing up on the men's faces, only the men. And I started to cry, and everybody wanted to know what was wrong with me, even the men with the face paint. What's wrong, Lynn? And I said, well, I'm feeling very, very, very ill. And I've been in too many countries, too many time zones, as I know I'm supposed to be here for 6 days, but I need to go back to the United States. So it was 1994, no cell phones or anything. So I just went to my room. I was in that hotel, packed my bag, went straight to the airport, and just waited for any flight that would start getting me back to the United States. So I flew to Frankfurt, then Frankfurt to New York, then New York to San Francisco. Took me forever to get home, but the whole time, the faces just kept coming, whether my eyes were closed or open. So by the time I got home, I was just a wreck, and I didn't tell anyone. I told my husband I was having nightmares because I didn't know what to do with it. And I tried to call John Perkins, and he had gone back to Ecuador. So I couldn't reach him. All you could do was fax and leave voicemails then, 1994. But eventually he came home. He said, they're waiting for us. We need to go. He had been in Shuar territory, and the Achuar had said, it's time. Bring people to us. Bring her and you. And they wanted 12 people from the modern world. People with open hearts, people with global voice, people who knew the rainforest is critical to the future of life, people who would respect the ways of the shaman, and people who would be open to whatever needs to be done to create the long-term stability of life itself. So John and I picked 10 other people, including my husband Bill. We went down to Quito. We traveled down the Valley of Volcanoes, over the eastern side of the Andes, down through the Pastaza River Canyon, and we paid a military plane to take us into Shuar territory, and then a Shuar pilot took us 3x3 into Achuar territory and dropped us off by a river in a kind of a dirt area. And when all 12 of us were there, they came out of the forest with their orange geometric face paint, their yellow, red, and black feather crowns, and spears, and loaded us into their dugouts and took us to a place to camp. And that was the beginning of the next chapter of my purpose. Sorry it took so long to get you there, but anyway. And that was a very, very, very profound encounter with the Achuar people, their leaders. We spent the next few days with them. They told us that they were ready for contact because they knew that contact was inevitable. So they were initiating it before it came to them in ways they couldn't control. And they told us, we know we called you here, but if you're coming to help us, don't waste your time. But if you're coming and you know your liberation is bound with ours, then let's work together. And so that's when the Pachamama Alliance was born. Pachamama means Mother Earth. It's an alliance between the indigenous peoples of the Amazon and conscious, committed people in the modern world for the sustainability of life. And that then became the next chapter of my purpose. And in order to leave the Hunger Project, which I thought was my mission for the rest of my life, it was very difficult to do. I was kind of a folk hero there, but I got malaria, and I'm so grateful I did, because I was sick for 9 months, not 8 months and not 10 months, 9 months. Interesting. And when I came out of it, I knew that I had a second calling, and my calling was to work with indigenous people of the Amazon to bring forth an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and socially just human presence on this planet. So that has been the next 30 years of my life. I would say when my mission was expressed through the Hunger Project, it was about human beings. The Pachamama Alliance is about all living things, all future generations, all children of all species for all time. From indigenous people, I've really learned that one of the most important things to work on is to end human supremacy. All the supremacies, white supremacy, male supremacy, all of them, colonialism, all stem from the original misunderstanding of our role on this planet as human beings, our species, our arrogance, what religion in some cases, when it's off course, has taught us that we have dominion. It's not true. It's not accurate. It's not right. So the Pachamama Alliance has really taught me to be in communion with all beings, all life. And indigenous people never bought into human supremacy. The giant otter is their brother, the grandfather, the kapok tree is their grandfather, the ayahuasca, the plant medicines are their grandmother. They don't consider themselves above anything. Whereas we've gotten caught in that. It's just devastated the planet. Our brothers and sisters, our kin on this planet, and the very life support system on which we depend. So that original, just like the mindset of scarcity, which I discovered was the original lie, human supremacy is the lie we're working on now. And it's so humbling to listen deeply to trees, to listen to soil, to listen to the wind, to understand that there's so much teaching taking place right now, and that the climate crisis is not happening to us, it's happening for us. It is Mother Earth humbling us, humbling her creatures, so that we can find our rightful role in relationship with her. And that this huge collapse that Bucky talked about is now, I now understand it in a whole nother level. That it's a huge humbling, and it's in service of a world that works for everyone, with no one, nothing left out. I think one way to look and see what you're doing on this planet is to look at what breaks your heart, what really breaks your heart. Maybe a lot of things break your heart, but what really breaks your heart, and what makes your heart sing. It's often the case that what breaks your heart and what makes your heart sing are related. And if you put those two together, sometimes you can find exactly why you're here. Mark Twain said, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And I think everyone's here for a purpose, or they wouldn't be here. We're in an epic time in human history, and everybody alive today has a role to play. And one of the clues is what breaks your heart and what makes your heart sing. And putting those two things together will give you a lot of clues and maybe the path towards your purpose. I think because the noise in the culture is so loud and so judgmental and so either or and so consumer and commercial and economically oriented, it's so loud that people can't hear their inner voice. So I think that's really what's going on. We're all about outer riches and it's so prevailing and so noisy and so, intense that we can't find our inner riches. And the inner riches are our purpose, why we're here, what we're meant to do. So I think that's the problem. And you just need to tone it down, or close your eyes and meditate, or be in silence, or get involved in something that makes your heart sing, and it will lead you to your purpose. Well, no one can ever know, I think, and that's really a good thing. It's not a real purpose-driven life is not a life that ever takes credit. It's like a gift to find your purpose. So I don't really know. It's my commitment to make a difference with my life. There's all kinds of beautiful statistics I could give you about hunger and poverty and their reduction, and women getting access to literacy in school and all of that. And it's beautiful, and I'm proud of it. But the truth is, I don't know, but I get really beautiful feedback from human beings that I've touched them, that I've made a difference with their life. Hunger and poverty is on the decline, and it wasn't. It was going up. It's now going down. The Amazon rainforest where we work is pristine and roadless, and oil company and mining company after oil company have tried to get in there, and they haven't gotten in. The indigenous people's voices around the world now are being heard and listened to and respected, and that wasn't the case 30 years ago. So I can say those things. I'm not sure if I had anything to do with it at all, but I've been privileged to participate. Well, Bucky used to say, if we eliminated all what he called the fake jobs, he calls the stock market and finance and lawyers and all that stuff fake jobs. I don't want to insult people, but that's what Bucky said. I'm not saying that, but Bucky said that. He said if we eliminate fake jobs, there would be just the right amount of cobblers, just the right amount of farmers, just the right amount of teachers, just the right amount of doctors. He said if people really followed their calling, the intellectual integrity of the universe is perfect. And we as a species would do what's ours to do, and everybody would find their dharma if there weren't so much noise in the culture and if it weren't all about money. So that's what Bucky said, and I think that's true. But let's just say, I think everybody's here. Let me just say this. As a species, I think we're here to ensure the flourishing of all life. I think that's why human beings are on this planet. We're the only species that has that capacity to ensure the flourishing of all life. I think that's why we're here. And then we take our role in that, in whatever way is our particular mission or unique talent and treasures. But everybody has a job to do. Everybody does. And to find it and to do it makes your heart sing. And because we're living in this economic madness and commercialized consumer culture, it sort of obfuscates the beauty of what we're really called to do. But if you can disaggregate yourself from that, go into some line of service and pay attention to your inner life, you'll find your dharma, you'll find your calling, you'll find your purpose, and your life will light up like a candle.